As a present that everyone should have received by this time for coming out on this evening.
It's lovely.
Yeah, well. So the pastor is very happy that I'm wearing my wedding garment for the 2 times that he's been pastor of the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament. He now knows that I actually own one, for which the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston is very happy to know that I own one. So when I first came, there was something that I quickly started to learn about the parishioners of the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament. And I don't know how I actually became very alert to this, but I began to realize that there were an awful lot of writers in this parish, authors, on a wide variety of spectrums, levels, poets, fiction writers, academicians. I was absolutely stunned. Op-ed writers. So in addition to, you know, the high-profile people, there were so many different people. Well, there was this rather perky lector that she, every time she got up there to be lecture at one of the do the readings at one of the masses, I always sat up and I paid attention. Now that's not to demean other people who were lectors and that I fell asleep on, but no, this one was rather. But I never asked her until last August, was it? Last August. She said to me, "You must be getting ready to go back into the classroom." And I looked at her kind of crestfallen, and I said, "Well, no, I retired. I retired last year, so I'm missing going back into the classroom." And I really was. So then I asked what she did. "Oh, I write." "Oh." And then, "Well, what do you write?" "Well," and then she started to tell me. And really, you know, and so Brenna Maloney, I'm reading her own words now, but I'm tweaking them a bit, began her career as a graphics reporter for the Night Raider Tribune wire service. She was a longtime reporter and editor for the Washington Post before leaving the Post to become the managing editor for National Geographic's Explorer magazine. Really? After more than 12 years as managing editor, she moved on to directing special projects for the Society's museum and education department. She still acts as a writing coach for corporate clients, now I learned this, and writes books in her spare time. That was one of the delightful parts of the conversation that we had before Mass there, a year ago, August, I guess it was. And she says, yeah, she says, I would really like to devote more time to writing kids' books. Correct? Yeah. Well, that's kind of where we left it until I went and I started to look her up on. And you'll be astounded as I was. Buzzkill is but the latest, I guess, huh? Buzzkill is but the latest. Fast and Slow series. Birds, reptiles, amphibians. Schools around the world. Pets around the world. Here's another one. Tadpole to Frog. Growing Up series. This one I loved. I had to really look this one up to get the cover of it and to see what it was all about. Good Dad Diego. Good Dad Diego. I'll let you explain that one. 125 animals that changed the world. Robopedia. Inside Kids, I guess it's a series. Okay. And Philomena's New Glasses. Whitewater, Ready Rabbit Gets Ready, I love it. This is mouse sockatumi, sockology, socks appeal. Wow. and Anna, I just sat there and said, absolutely, positively amazing. Well, if you've had a chance to read any of Buzzkill, you know what you're in for. So it's my pleasure, it's my absolute delight to welcome Brenna. I'm sitting here waiting to be. By the end of
Nothing like
it. No bad
Thank you, Father.
Oh, thank you.
I think we need to close that door and put the hanger in it.
Close the door, it's too loud.
It's a little chilly.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna freeze.
All
Okay.
worse.
Hold on, we'll close it. A cockroach can live without its own head for 168 hours.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. Moths can't fly during earthquakes.
That was interesting.
The larva of a Goliath beetle weighs as much as a McDonald's quarter pounder.
Wow.
The praying mantis is the only animal on earth with one ear. Bees recognize human faces, and aphids are born pregnant. I could go on all day. The insect world is a fascinating place. Now, you may not think so. You might think bugs are ew, gross. They're scary, or they're dangerous, or they're icky. Surveys tell us that 25% of Americans fear insects. We don't like them. They bite, they sting, they carry disease, they ruin our picnics. But insects are actually amazing creatures, and they are among the most successful living organisms on our planet, and we cannot live without them. Now, I just want to be clear from the beginning that I am not an entomologist. I am a regular person, more or less. I'm not even what you would call a bug lover, exactly. I mean, have you seen them? Like close up? Some of them really are ew gross. So that said, I did manage to write an entire book about them. And so how did I do that? Well, a lot of reporting, a lot of research, a lot of talking to experts. I sort of did the method acting version of writing a book. I wanted to experience the insect world, which meant that I had to be exposed to a lot of insects, and I had to handle a lot of insects, and I lived with some, and I ate others, and I became a beekeeper. She's gonna pass out. I became a beekeeper. I dragged my family through all sorts of strange bug adventures, willingly and mostly unwillingly. I tested the patience of a lot of my friends by talking too much about insects. I lost a few friends by talking too much about a lot of insects. But even after all of that, I can't claim that I'm a bug lover exactly, but man, do I appreciate them. And do I now understand how they fit into our world. And I know just enough to be dangerous, and at worst, I know just enough to kind of spill what I know onto you. Now, when Father first asked me to be part of this speaker series, I looked at the lineup. Priest, 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 me. And I said to him, rather gently, Father, one of these things is not like the other. But he assured me that it would be okay, and that you would come and you would find it interesting. So for those of you who he offered to pay, I will see him after, and I'm sure he'll make good on that. Definitely, it's all right. I don't know how religious a talk this will be, other than to say that we are all God's creatures, even the lowly insects. And maybe, if you learn a little more about insects, you will learn a little bit more about God and his magnificent creations. So, The truth is most of us don't think a lot about insects, and when we do, we don't have an emotional connection to them. I mean, how many of us feel really good about stink bugs? Yeah, not so much. So I spent a lot of the beginning of the book just telling you about the world of insects. Like what are they and where are they and how many are there? There's close to 1 million species of insects that have been identified and named. Those are the ones we know about. And then there's like all the ones we don't know about. And the estimate of how many species that we don't know about or haven't named or haven't discovered yet is somewhere between 3 and 100 million species. That's a lot. So what does that mean in terms of how many insects are on Earth at a given time? Like, how many are we talking about? So the estimate is 10 quintillion individual insects at any given time. Well, what is even a quintillion? I don't know. I had to look it up. So a quintillion is a 10 with 18 zeros behind it. I know, like that helps. But still, it's a lot. It's a lot. And you probably already know that insects are everywhere. They're all in your basement. I have already heard. But they live in every biome on Earth, including Antarctica. Antarctica always gets short shrift, like nothing lives there. There is a flightless midge that does just fine there. And insects thrive on Earth, and one of the reasons that they do is because there's so much diversity in their bodies and their structure, and because they've learned to adapt to survive in all these different environments. Now, with people, one body type kind of suits us all. We all kind of have the same shape, basically, and 2 eyes, and a nose and a mouth, and everything's kind of in the same place on us mostly, and it mostly works mostly. But in the insect world, there's a lot of variation. It doesn't work like that. So how you see as an insect, how you hear, how you eat is vastly different from how people do, and even vastly different from how different insect species do. So if you're an insect and you want to eat, you are either a chewer, a sucker, a sipper, or a sponger, because you have specialized mouth parts that enable you to eat in those ways. If you're an insect and you need to hear, you may have very sensitive hearing, but your ears are probably not going to be on your head. Mosquitoes hear from the tips of their antennae. Crickets listen through their legs. Lacewings have ears on their wings. Cicadas and grasshoppers hear through their abdomen. Parasitic flies listen through their neck. And in the moth and butterfly world, hands off, you can find ears everywhere, like even inside their mouths. It's amazing. Insects don't hear the way we hear, they don't see the way we see, they don't taste the way we taste. They also move in really interesting ways. So they fly, they float around, they skitter around. Some are super fast. There's a type of tiger beetle that can run so fast, it temporarily blinds itself. Other insects, glacially slow. Can't even tell they're moving. Did it move? Is it dead? I can't tell. They also have some amazing defenses. They taste bad, they smell bad, they sting you, they bite you, and they can fool you. There are a number of insects that can disguise themselves to look like poop, so you won't pick them up, which, you know, if you think about it, it's kind of a good strategy. It works on me, I don't want to touch that. But beyond telling you about their world, what I really wanted readers to understand from this book is all of the roles that they play on the planet. Insects, first and foremost, feed the world. You've probably heard this statistic before. 3/4 of the world's flowering plants depend on pollinators to reproduce. And 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat exists because of animal pollinators. Well, most of those animal pollinators are insects. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's bees, right? Like it's bees. Everybody knows it's bees, right? Yes, yes, yes. It is bees, but it's also butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, even mosquitoes pollinate. A lot of insects do. And in chapter 2, we kind of go through all of the pollination stuff. Chapter 3 looks at insects as a food source because a lot of animals eat insects. But I have to tell you, a lot of people also eat insects. Now, in the US, we're not so comfortable with that idea. Most of us don't nibble on crickets as a normal course of business. But the rest of the world does. And I want to read to you a little part from the book to kind of give you a sense of this. I hope I don't gross anyone out too bad. I know what some of you are thinking. No way, no how. I would never eat a bug. That is disgusting. But let me stop you right there and tell you that you probably ingest some insect matter every day without knowing it. Insect bits have a way of getting into our food during the normal cycle of growing and processing it. Now, lucky for us, the FDA keeps track of such things. If you've got some spare time and a really stern stomach, the agency maintains a detailed list that outlines the country's food defects. Defects, I should tell you, that's the FDA's way of labeling poop, mold, and insect or rodent parts. And it refers to insect defects as filth, which can mean whole insects, insect parts, or just poop. How much is too much? Well, you and I would probably say that any amount is too much, but the FDA takes a different stand on these matters. According to the agency, it says that it is economically impractical to grow, harvest, or process raw products that are totally free of non-hazardous, naturally occurring, unavoidable defects. As long as the number of defects remains low, the FDA argues they probably won't present a health hazard. Oh, good, I feel better already. Now, the list comes with a handy glossary of terms, and I suggest that you hit that up early because by reading it, you will be able to make some important distinctions. Contamination, for example, is the addition of foreign material to a food product. Examples of this would be dirt, hair, poop, insects, and mold. Now, contamination is not to be confused with damage to a food product, such as tunneling, gnawing, or the presence of egg cases. And neither term should be confused with infestation, which is the presence of any live or dead life cycles of stages of insects. It's good to be clear on that. Now, as a general rule, the FDA is not keen on having whole insects befoul our food, but it is a little more lenient when it comes to heads, legs, and other bits. And the level of allowable defects seems to vary considerably from food to food. So I don't mean to editorialize here, but maybe lay off the apple butter, okay? And I say this with great sadness because I like apple butter, but the FDA allows for an average of 5 or fewer whole insects, and that's not counting mites, aphids, thrips, or scale insects. Those are the small ones, not counting those, per 100 grams. So what's 100 grams? Think of it as like 100 grams is like a stick of butter. Okay, so picture a stick of butter. Okay, so some of the other foods, I happened to look at the list and it referred to fig products like fig Newtons or fig paste. Okay, that's interesting. But what's interesting about the list is that the FDA threshold for fig paste specifically mentions heads. 13, if you're curious. 13 or more insect heads per 100 grams of fig paste is a no-go for the FDA. But like, what about the bodies? Why are they counting just the heads? Okay, maggots, I'm afraid, seem to be of concern for tomato products. Canned tomatoes allow for some variation though. For every 500 grams, you can have either 10 or fewer fly eggs, or 5 or fewer fly eggs with 1 maggot, or no more than 2 maggots. Anything more than that would be a hard no from the FDA. Okay, what about raisins? Like raisins. Oh, come on, raisins have to be safe, right? Right. No. So golden raisins can contain, you'll never eat again, 35 fruit fly eggs, as well as 10 or more whole insects for every 8 ounces. So the little boxes that the kids carry in their lunch, that's 1 ounce. So that little box may have potentially 4 eggs and 1 whole insect.
Oh, yay.
Now, I'm sorry I've ruined your day with all this information. I'm not trying to make the point, I am just trying to make the point that you do already, albeit largely unwillingly and unintentionally, consume insects. Now, whether you would do this on purpose and knowingly is another matter. You might need a little more persuasion. So let's go to a little more persuasion. Say we're on a survival show, and you and I have to live off the land for 21 days by ourselves with only a fire starter and a machete. Well, except that I've got that little burlap bag and it's stuffed with like trail mix and junior mints, so I'm gonna be okay. But you are gonna have to eat nasty stuff and drink from scummy mud holes, because that's like sort of the point of those shows. So do we have any survival skills between the two of us? Well, I can't speak for you, but I definitely will be of no use to you whatsoever. So I was pondering this situation. What would I do? What would I do if I had to be in this situation? And I came across this interesting website run by a Missouri-based survival training camp called Sigma 3 Survival School. And on their website, there were two videos. One showed how to hunt grasshoppers in the wild, and the second showed how to prepare them and eat them. Grasshoppers. Now see, I've got a thing about grasshoppers. It's a pathological fear that's probably ripe for psychoanalysis. I could no more eat a grasshopper than I could watch those videos. In the first video, Rob Allen, founder, president, and head of the school, has cut down a small leafy tree branch, and he's calling this his stunna stick, which he will use to stun or immobilize grasshoppers in the big field behind him. I watched transfixed, paralyzed. Not the grasshopper-infested field, Rob. Don't go. Don't do it. Don't do it. But no, he's going. He's going right in. I probably shouldn't worry, because Rob is an able survivalist. He's been an outdoorsman all his life. He's an Army veteran who served in Iraq. He's skilled in field infantry tactics. He has combat trauma training. He has seen some stuff. And clearly he's not about to get his briefs in a bunch over a couple of grasshoppers, not like some of us. So as he's walking along in the video, Rob is smacking the ground with the tree branch, knocking the living daylights out of these grasshoppers. And he says, as Americans, bugs are kind of repulsive to us. But the majority of the world eats them on a regular basis. And in a survival situation, this is a huge consideration, especially in the beginning, because we have our survival priorities. We take care of our shelter, our water, our fire, and our food. And you can use grasshoppers as a supplement to your diet, or even a mainstay. I'm thinking, not likely, Rob, no way. So as he wields his stunner, Rob picks up the dazed grasshoppers off the ground and he pops them into this plastic container, and I can hardly breathe when he holds up the container so that we can all see them. In the next video, he's sitting by a campfire, and he has a long stick that he has cut a little slit into. And he's stripping the bark off of the stick. Bark, he's saying, is full of tannins. I'm removing the bark because a lot of bark have tannins in them, and we don't want any kind of wood that's going to impart a nasty flavor. He must be joking, right? Tannins are an astringent, so they pucker the mouth, they numb the tongue, they constrict the throat. But surely that has to be better than actually tasting the grasshopper. I would need my stick to have extra tannins. Rob deftly plucks off the grasshopper's legs and wings. I can hardly stand it. Then he slips the little body into the slit and the stick, and as he sets the stick over the fire to roast, he says, "These grasshoppers are a complete food, guys. I mean, you could literally survive off these things." And this is the point where I think I fainted. But as cowardly as I am, I do feel the need to speak to Rob directly to gain insight. He is obviously a courageous and righteous soul, a brave man, and there's probably things I can learn from him. So in our first conversation, I aim to establish sort of a baseline with Rob about the sorts of things he has actually eaten in a survival situation. And it turns out the list is pretty extensive. He eats small game and fish, of course, but he also eats some of nature's more interesting fare. Raccoon, squirrel, skunk, opossum, mice and rats. You eat mice and rats, I said? Well, Rats, preferably, he says, just because they're larger. But a city rat is really different from a woods rat. A rat in the wild actually has a really clean diet because they're eating seeds and nuts, so they're pretty clean tasting. But a city rat, I probably wouldn't touch a city rat unless I was just desperate. Right? No, me neither. And insects, I prompt, you eat insects? As far as bugs are concerned, I try to keep it to arthropods, grasshoppers, crickets. They're very high in protein. Probably my favorite thing to eat in the bug world would be grubs. Grubs are extraordinarily protein and fat dense. They're like 40% protein, 40% fat. Oh, that's good to know. By now I've read all the statistics. I know what a great food source they are. I know that they're very healthy. But I just can't get past the idea of it. We can't continue to grow as the population has been, and keep eating chickens and cows, Rob tells me gently. There's a finite amount of resources for that. I know, Rob. At the end of the day, it's just food. I know, Rob, I know. I just don't think that I could do it. I don't think I could eat a grasshopper. Yeah, you could, he says. We do a 7-day program where people live off the land, and I guarantee by day 5, you'd put anything in your mouth. No, Rob, by day 5, I would be dead. No, you wouldn't. I bet you'd survive a heck of a lot longer than you'd think. Women are mentally tough. That's true. Women are. Not this particular woman, but other women. Wonder Woman could probably do it. Madeleine Albright could probably have done it. Meryl Streep could portray a woman who could convincingly do it. My mother could do it. They're all steely women. I hate that I'm not tough like that. But in the end, Rob is right. I do end up eating some insects, but you'll have to read on more in the chapter to find out which ones and how they tasted. Now, chapter 4 of this book is about death and decomposition and rot and smelly things. All living things die eventually, and they decompose, and when they do, they start to pile up if it were not for insects. Insects take care of all of that stinky stuff. Chapter 4 is actually my favorite chapter in the entire book because it's fascinating, but it is gross and sticky. So if you're sensitive, just move right on to chapter 5, which talks about everything else. Chapter 5 talks about how insects inspire us in our art, our music, our literature, our inventions, our medicine, and our technology. Now I know I'm saying an awful lot of nice things about our buggy friends, but I know they can be problematic. They carry disease, they ruin our crops, they can be very destructive. I don't shy away from that. It's all in chapter 6. By the time we get to chapters 7 and 8 and 9, we start looking at what a dangerous place our world has become for insects. Agriculture, urbanization, deforestation, pollution, they're all having negative effects on insects. We're eating up their habitats. We're constantly poisoning them. We blind them with light pollution. We deafen them with noise pollution. We introduce invasive species that foul up their whole ecosystems. Our planet is heating up. I mean, we're terrible. We are terrible stewards of planet Earth. We're messing things up in a big way. However, chapter 10 does offer some hope and some solutions on a global scale, a national scale, and a local scale. What actions can regular people like you and I, take to help our insect friends? And it's more than you might think. Everything from planting native plants to using natural pesticides, garlic, composting waste, donating money to good conservation causes, donating your time to good conservation causes. And I want you to understand something that's really, really important. It's not like it's all up to us, because insects will meet us halfway. It's something called reproductive success. And my family and I experienced this powerful truth firsthand. I will read one more passage to illustrate my point. This is chapter 9, Reproduction and Resilience. I knew this was going to be a tough sell after the ant incident. We did ant farming earlier. And ants, well, they're so much smaller and more benign. This was much bigger and much more unnerving. This was cockroaches. cockroaches are not something you invite into your home. They're something you fear. And if you are so unfortunate to find them in your home, you set that part of your house on fire and keep a can of Raid under your pillow just in case some of them didn't burn. My battle cry of, "In the name of science," while writing this book, fell on deaf ears with my husband Chuck and my sons Liam and Devin. They were not interested in any more science from me. I tried to explain that these were different. These were Madagascar hissing cockroaches. They weren't the same thing as like the nasty cockroach we might find behind a dumpster. These are bigger, right? Said Chuck. They are, yes, but in a way, that's very helpful. How? Well, they're easier to observe and you can see their anatomy much more clearly. You can also see them coming if they accidentally escape, but I didn't say that part out loud. I noticed Chuck protectively crossing his arms over his chest, and you want to bring them into our home and keep them as pets. I want to bring one into our home in a small habitat with a secure lid, and not really as pets exactly, you know, just more for observational purposes. They're amazing scavengers. And how long does a Madagascar hissing cockroach live exactly? I'll keep it in the sunroom, I said, completely avoiding this question, but preemptively answering the next question he was going to ask. He didn't need to know, like, right now that they live 5 years. It'll be safe in the sunroom. You guys won't even know what's in the house, I said. Liam shook his head. I don't know, Mom. You're on your own with this one. They sound kind of gross. They aren't gross, Liam. Okay, I mean they are. They're very gross. They're huge and they're cockroachy, but they're not disgusting. They're not nasty. They're actually quite fastidious. The faces looking back at me were unilaterally unimpressed by the alleged fastidiousness of the cockroach. Devin looked up from his iPad, took one headphone off his ear and said, "What are we talking about?" Never mind, I said. They'll come around. So the box arrived on Earth Day, and the FedEx guy raised an eyebrow as he gently set the box down on the porch. Can't say that I blame him. The box was plastered with bright red warning signs: live material, perishable, avoid heat and frost. I walked the box quickly through the house, directly to the sunroom, not interacting with any family members. My heart was beating a little fast. Didn't know what I was going to find. I mean, surely when I opened the box, the cockroach is in some kind of container, right? I mean, it's not just like running around loose. So I carefully slid open the tape, opened the flaps, and the cockroach habitat was in there wrapped in bubble wrap, and then the cockroach was kind of in one of those takeout boxes. But my heart stopped because there was a label on the top and it said 2 hissing cockroaches. 2? 2? No, not 2, just the one. I just need the one. 2 could be a problem. I pried off the lid and all I saw was a bunch of paper towels, so I slid the whole mess into the habitat, and there they were, 1, 2, 3. 3. Why did they give me 3? Do these people not know how to count? Were they having a special sale, buy 1, get 2 free? 3 is a problem. This was the exact moment that my husband came into the sunroom, and if he wasn't keen on the presence of 1 cockroach in his house, you can imagine his delight at seeing 3. And of course, he asked all the right and reasonable questions. Why do we have 3? What are the genders of these 3? What if they mate? I barely had time to look at them, let alone figure out their genders. But this was an easy fix because there are physical differences between the male and the female, and the males are the ones that hiss, and so we could figure this out. So I went into the sunroom, I was ready to take a look, and Liam appeared. Oh, did your cockroaches come? They did, would you like to see? And he's like, I was like, come on over, come take a look. So I removed the very secure lid and moved a few paper towels aside so that he could look at them more clearly, and he looks down into the habitat and says, Mom, what is that? Well, that's just never good, right? When somebody says that in that way, that's never good. What is what? I said. If there was ever a time to curse, it was now. Something was coming out of the back end of one of the cockroaches. It was a long, white, tubular sort of something. Liam and I looked at each other and our mouths dropped. We both knew exactly what it was, even though we had no idea. Google it, I whispered. So he reached for his phone and spoke into it. What does a Madagascar hissing cockroach look like when it's giving birth? He turned the phone over for me to see. I looked at the phone. I looked in the habitat. I looked in the phone. No! This cannot be happening. This cockroach has been in my house for 15 minutes and now it's giving birth. Holy crap. I'd say so, said Liam. How many eggs do you think are in that case? My hand went to my mouth to stifle a scream because I did know the answer to that question. There can be as many as 60, I said. Holy crap! Yeah, don't tell Dad. Liam lifted an eyebrow. Don't tell Dad now. Just give me time to think. He says, what's to think about it, Mom? This gross cockroach just gave birth. Dad's gonna notice. I said, it's an egg case. You know, we might have some time before the nymphs come out. Nymphs, said Chuck as he walked in. So that didn't go over well. Ken, Barbie, and Mitch settled in. And yes, before you ask, I did give them sweet names in the hopes, the desperate hope, that cute names would somehow deflect the fact that they were cockroaches living in our house on purpose. So their original habitat felt too small because, you know, it was designed for one and now we have 3 in an egg case. So I moved everyone to better accommodations, 10-gallon fish tank. And I gave them an empty egg carton to hide under, which they seemed to appreciate. And they drank water from a sponge and they nibbled on carrots and apples and the dog shared some of his dog food. And so it was all good. And they plotted their escape. Cockroaches can climb anything. No, really, anything. Anything. They scaled the glass walls with ease. Not a problem at all. That lid was on good and tight. Chuck asked me to seal it with tape just in case, and I did, and it did not stop them. I took them out on occasion to directly observe them, the whole point of this exercise. And once you touch them, they really are hard to put down. Not because they are irresistible, no. To be honest, they gave me the creeps. But it's because their feet cling to you so securely that you can't get them off. It can be a little panic-inducing if you're already skeeved out. So Barbie and Mitch seemed nice enough, but Ken was very grouchy. He hissed a lot. But by and large, they seemed to be gentle, social creatures. And maybe it was okay to have 3. I mean, maybe they needed each other for company. I started to relax about that whole egg case thing. Nothing, right? So imagine my horror 2 days later when I went in to check on our little friends and I found a single baby cockroach sitting on top of the egg carton. Guess that meant the egg case was viable after all. And where there is one baby cockroach, there is liable to be 51. Barbie gave birth to 51 babies. I nearly fainted. That's the thing about insects though, high fecundity and high fertility. So fecundity refers to the number of eggs a female can produce, and fertility refers to the number of eggs that hatch. So when both are high and the gestation period is short, as often or as little as 2 to 4 weeks, you're talking about an organism with a high rate of reproductive success. So I was in over my head, I knew it. So I turned to Dr. Phil for help. Not that Dr. Phil, another Dr. Phil. This is Dr. Phil Mulder at the Department of Entomology at Oklahoma State University. Thanks to some heavy online searching, I discovered that Dr. Mulder had penned a helpful document entitled Madagascar Hissing Cockroaches, Information and Care. So after reading it, I felt fairly certain that Dr. Mulder would be able to help me, and I sent him a panicked email, and he confirmed my suspicions, but inflamed my fears by writing, in light of the brood that was produced, you can probably get a sense that you don't want to get into the breeding cockroach business. It will become overwhelming, and eventually your living quarters will not smell very good. Great. So I needed to know what I was up against, and it was too much math for this little brain to do. So I decided to approach Mr. Coster, who was, he's one of Wilson's finest math teachers. He taught Liam pre-calc and Devin algebra. And so I approached him. I wondered if he would think that my request for help was strange, but Mr. Coster didn't seem fazed by my story at all, which probably should have been troubling to us both. Instead, he seemed almost giddy at the prospect of trying to solve what he called my exponential growth problem. He asked me a couple clarifying questions, and for the sake of the math, we assumed that half of the babies would always be female, and each female would have the midpoint number of babies, 40. A few days later, Mr. Coster came back with a spreadsheet and a few caveats. First, he had projected the data out for 5 years, which is Barbie's potential lifespan. But he wanted me to understand that this was what he had created was a highly idealized model in which there were no predators, 100% of the babies reached maturity, and no one ever died. And it also assumed an infinite amount of resources and space to support the growing population. Fine, I get it, I said. We're just running the numbers here. Hit me, what's the number? 112.2 billion. My knees buckled a little. I checked the spreadsheet, and it was broken down by year. So after the first year, I would have 2,640. After the second year, I would have 189,280. After year 3, 25.12 million. Year 4, 1.78 billion. And after 5 years, 112.2 billion cockroaches. Holy crap. What are you gonna do? He said. No idea. You have to read more on chapter 9 to find out what I actually did. Or you can ask me later, maybe I'll tell you. All right, so the lesson to be learned here is never host cockroaches because it can get out of hand. But also that insects can bounce back and they can continue to succeed on our planet with just a little bit of help from us. Some dog food, they do very well. We aren't powerless, and there are little things we can do and bigger things we can do, and if we're really into helping, whole movements that we can affect to try to help the insect world and help Mother Earth. You don't have to love insects. You don't. I can't say that I love them, but if you could just be a little more mindful of them, just a little more tolerant of them, if you could resist the urge to squash them and crush them the second you see them, I think that if you consider their roles that they play as pollinators, as food sources, maybe not for you, but for other insects, for other creatures, if you think about how they're fantastic decomposers, if you think about how they are actually inspiration to us for our inventions and our medicine and our technology, if you could just leave them a little space in the world, I think we would all be better off. They certainly would, but we would as well. Here's what I believe. I think if you start leaving space for the smallest of things, then that grows and makes you more aware of what's around you. And if you can hold kindness in your heart for the stink bug, think of how you're gonna feel for the jerk that cut you off in traffic, or your neighbor who always has the weed whacker going at 5 in the morning. Just create a little more space for your fellow man and your fellow bug. I like to think about bees. I'm a beekeeper. A bee is a tiny thing, right? Smallest of things. And during her time on this mortal coil, a worker bee will produce 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Barely enough for you to taste. She's one bee. Yet she and her sister bees gather together, work together, and to produce a pound of honey, they will visit 2 million flowers, one trip at a time. And if you think about it, that's kind of our path too. You and me and whoever else we can get on board. Each of us has to be the bee. We have to work steady and work hard and contribute in whatever small ways we can to help Mother Earth feel more imbalanced. If we do enough small things, it does add up, it does build, it does matter, it does mean something. Just ask the bee. That's it. Thanks for coming. Any questions? Yes.
You didn't say anything about insects spreading diseases.
Chapter 6.
Okay. I haven't watched the book yet. I'm waiting for the movie version.
Oh. You'll be waiting a while, sir. No. Chapter 6 is actually one of the last chapters I wrote, and it was very hard, mostly because I spent so much of the book singing the praises. And then the thing that got to me, and you'll see in this, of course, they carry disease and they destroy crops and they do destructive things. But what really choked me up was the number of times throughout history when people used insects as weapons. That's what got to me, and I had a hard time writing that and sort of reconciling that in my own head. Like, it's just, they would use the insect's strengths to kill other people. And that, you should read chapter 6 if you're interested, because it was that was very, very challenging. Anything else? Yes?
Do you still have the deer skull in your living room?
Who's asking?
Do you?
That's another story. Is that in the book? That's not in the book.
Yes, it is.
Oh shoot, we didn't edit that out. Oh, yes, yes. Well, yes. Everyone else can read about that later when I'm not here. What else?
How many cockroaches do you have now?
Well, okay, I might as well tell you the end of that story. So I was really sweating bullets because the part I didn't read was that they really were escaping. They could get, I mean, we're talking duct tape, and like, you know, that mailing tape, the clear, that stuff's really good tape. And I had it on all the sides, and the little babies would just like, they would, I don't even know how they did it, but I would be walking along and I'd see one like in the living room, and oh my God. So I'd go running over, like making sure nobody else is watching, and they wouldn't even lose a leg. I mean, they were just like, they got out somehow. So I kept like putting them back in and putting them back in, and they kept getting bigger and bigger, and I was panicked because I thought, okay, that's Barbie's brood, but like what happens when they get old, and I'm checking the timetable and looking at the calendar. So I actually reached out to a friend of mine at City Wildlife, which is an organization, nonprofit, that takes in injured animals like, you know, squirrels or something, and in the city, and they rehabilitate them and then they release them. And I had done a lot of volunteer work with them, and so I knew those guys really well. And I said, look, I got a problem, cockroaches. And she recommended, you know, try the Smithsonian, because they have the insect lab, and you know, she made a couple suggestions, different universities I might be able to foist them off on, and nothing worked. And I was really running out of time, and my husband was like way out of patience, because the cockroaches happened after a lot of other things happened. So I went back to my friend at City Wildlife, and I was like, do you have any other suggestions? And she's like, well, you know, circle of life, I've got some hungry mallards. So she was rehabilitating some mallards, and so I gave her the whole tank full, and they had a lovely, lovely meal. But the alternative was I would have to put them in the freezer and just kill them, and I didn't want it. That seemed so wasteful and awful. And so they did live a very comfortable life with me, and then they served a good purpose. So yeah, but don't ever buy those. It's such a bad problem. What else? Anything? Yes?
At what age did you find your big interest in insects?
I'm still waiting. You know, it's interesting because I've written a lot of books, and like Father said, I picture books and easy nonfiction for young kids, because I really like educating people about the natural world and getting them interested, and kids are so great for that. And I found that over the years, a lot of adults read my books, which makes me very happy, because, you know, we all want stuff explained to us. So I had written a number of things, and I was having lunch with a friend of mine at the Post, and he was the book editor for the nonfiction books, and we were having a tough love lunch. I didn't know that at the time, but apparently we were. And he said, you know, Brenna, you've written a lot of really good books, but I just feel like you need to, like, maybe you need to dig deeper and write something a little more, you know, like not for kids, something for adults, something, you know. And I said, well, I don't know that I have anything to say, you know, like, and he kept pushing it. He kept saying, no, I really think you should do something big. And so I remember it was a couple weeks before Christmas in 2019, and I went home and I was all in a huff. I was like, well, who does he think he is? I'm fine. I've written some lovely things. I don't need, you know, I was really mad at him, and I thought, well, I'll show him. I'll just write a book proposal, and it'll suck so much that he'll say that he was wrong. And I was trying to think of, like, he kept saying, what do you care about? What matters to you? And I thought, well, I don't, you know, a lot of things matter to me. But I realized that, I mean, most writers keep story files. We keep, you know, like, oh, that's interesting. You know, read that. Oh, and so I started to look at my vast collection. I realized that I had this enormous pile of stories, just news clippings and magazine articles on books that I had just sort of like subconsciously like, oh, this is really interesting. It's really, and I realized, oh, okay, I guess I'm really interested in this. So I very angrily wrote this book proposal and I gave it back to him after New Year's and I was like, see, told you I couldn't do it. And he reads it and he goes, yeah, okay, we need to talk.
That's a great title.
Yeah, thanks. My youngest came up with that. We were sitting around the dinner table before the cockroaches and the ants and all the other things, and I said, what should I call it? And he goes, I think you should call it Buzzkill. And I was like, oh, let me get a pen.
So you started writing when you were very young?
Yes, I think my first book I wrote at the tender age of 6. It was entitled I See and Play. It was never published, but it was quite good. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and there were 4 of us. And in the summer, I grew up in the Midwest, where there's literally nothing to do if you're not farming or whatever. And she would just be like pulling her hair out with us because we'd get underfoot and there were no programs to go to, you know, we were just at home being bored. And so she literally would tell us, go write a book, go write something right now, just to get us off of her. And so it's kind of funny because there's a whole evolution of me and my siblings writing these really bad, like little picture books and stuff when we were really, really little. And it just, I guess it stuck with me.
Great idea.
Yeah, it kept us very busy. I See Him Play. It was a good one. What else? Go.
Do we know exactly where John the Baptist was eating in the desert?
Locust and honey.
Chapter.
Yes, it's in the book. Yes. Actually, the Bible makes quite a few references to insect eating and the power of insects and that. But yes, it was. And my survivalist friend brought it up too. And throughout my research, I kept coming across John the Baptist eating the locust and the honey, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll put it in. But yeah, that's what it was.
Because in Mexico, eating crickets is a great delicacy.
Absolutely.
And they are excellent.
There you have it.
Chocolate covered?
They're very good.
They fry them, they roll them in spices. There are many, many ways to eat insects. I learned, and I actually tried a few at home, which went over well. You can, they sell cricket flour. They grind up crickets and turn it into flour. And it's, you know, if you didn't know it was cricket flour, you would just think it was flour, and it's actually got a lot of protein in it. It's got the ground up bugs in it. And I did make cricket cookies. I warned my family. I said, you do not have to eat this, but this is made with crickets. And the boys ate it. My husband was like, no, I don't think so. And I made brownies the same way, same thing. Boys were like, sure. Husband was like, I'm leaving the room now. Please stop doing this. But yeah.
Did they have a bad taste?
No, you couldn't tell it all. You couldn't tell it all. When you bake with it, you can't tell. I mean, it's ground up. The thing is, you know, if I had opened, and I did buy like bag of crickets that you could just like, and I had a hard time. I could eat grubs, little ones, but I have such a thing with grasshoppers that crickets are too similar, and I just couldn't put it in my mouth. I was like, no. So I was very cowardly. But across the world, and the book gets into that, all the different countries and all the different ways and all the different, you know, because I mean, in many places, like, you know, in Australia, witchetty grubs, I mean, that's good eating, you know, and you grow up with that, and so you're socialized that this is a normal thing that you eat. But in Europe and the US, not so much, you know. I mean, there's certain movements, especially in the US and different places, but little pockets where you'll find people eat it and find it, but most of us are like, you know, gross, because we didn't grow up with it. Yes.
So 2 sort of insect eating stories. One is one of my son's Wharton classmates has a business in Bethesda that makes dog food out of cricket flour.
Perfect.
For that very reason.
Yep.
And the other thing is I spent a lot of time in Papua New Guinea and really in the bush with everybody wearing leaves and feathers. And So my mother was
Oh, you're gonna make me talk on the way home, aren't you?
Anyway, so,
She's got a chapter on it.
I don't have a chapter on that, but I need
so
it.
they had these huge cicadas, and so I wanted to bring a huge cicada home for my mother's third graders to see, because they were big. And so all these sort of teenage boys were around the campfire and getting the cicadas, and so they brought me one on a stick that had just been roasted. And I said, that's not really the kind I want. And they said, oh, they're very good.
I'm sure they are. No, thank you.
But so, I mean, they really are a regular part of the.
Yep. It's just not a big deal for people around the world to eat them at all. So we've got some growing to do on that, because for us it's still a little, I mean, I did try, but oof. Other questions? Yes.
Okay. On this food chain idea, one of the laws of the jungle is that the big animals eat the small animals. Do the big insects eat the small insects?
Yes, in some cases they do. The smaller ones are sort of dinner for everyone.
Okay.
So bigger insects, reptiles, amphibians, of course, land mammals. We think of anteaters, kind of the ants and are same. So yeah, the smaller you are. That's why their defenses are so interesting. If you study their defenses, some of them do some really crazy things to avoid being eaten. It's pretty clever, actually. And that's, you start to think about God's design, you start to think about, I don't know how you can look at an insect and not believe in God. Who else could have created such a masterful, it's just amazing. And we don't think about them because they're either pests or they're just so small that we don't even notice. But when you start to dig into it, then you really become a believer fast. Yes?
A couple of weeks ago when it was really warm out, I got 2 mosquito bites.
Oh yes.
I'm a February baby and from Chicago, never has that ever happened to me in my life.
They were waiting for you.
Yeah. And so it's concerning, especially for us who don't have screened-in porches, such the mild winter that we've had. How do we coexist with them, and what are the long-term implications to having mild winters like this?
So you've asked 2 questions. So the first one is how do we cope with it, because nobody likes getting bitten. I don't like getting bitten either. I made a very strange discovery. I told you I was a beekeeper, and I had new neighbors move in next door, and they saw the beehive, and they wanted to be sensitive, but they had a lot of mosquitoes in their yard. Well, so did we. And they wanted to get rid of them because they had little kids and they wanted to be out and playing, and they didn't want to be scratched all the time. And so we had this conversation with them because they were very respectful. They were like, no, we don't want to poison your bees, but we got to do something about our problem. And so we actually, this place called the Mosquito Squad?
Yeah.
Okay, so we contacted the Mosquito Squad and we said, what have you got that's bee friendly? Just maybe they have something. Well, they did. It's a garlic treatment. They literally come and they hose our yards down, both of our yards, with some sort of garlic solution, which is a natural pesticide for mosquitoes. Mosquitoes hate garlic, but bees don't care. So they hose it for about 15 minutes. Your yard smells really unusual, but then it dissipates and it's fine. And it completely took care of our mosquito problem, their mosquito problem, and kept my bees healthy. But there are some natural other plants, and I go into it in the book, like lavender and a couple of other things that are natural repellents for mosquitoes. So you can plant a bunch of those things around. There's things that you can do. Now the second question is the big question, the more concerning question. How is climate change having an effect on all of these things? It's affecting everything, not just the insects, like every aspect of our lives. And that's why it's good to be mindful of how interconnected things are, because a lot of things that we do are just stupid and self-destructive. And if you can just kind of pause a minute and say, okay, wait a minute, let's be a little more mindful about how we approach our lives. If more people could do that, we would have more of a fighting chance. But a lot of the damage is irreversible. So I don't know what we're gonna do.
Also, now I'm thinking my Sicilian grandmother never got bit. It must have been her garlic.
I had no idea that would work, but it did.
So are they happy with the book? The publishers?
Yes, the book has gotten, so if you care about these things, you get reviewed by important things. And if you get a good review, it's called a starred review.
Mhm.
And the book's gotten 4 starred reviews, which is really unusual. So yes, they're very happy with me right now. It's good.
And what do they call people who, experts in bugs? What do they call people? Experts?
Entomologists.
Entomologists, are they happy with the book?
They seem to be, no complaints so far. I mean, they'll haggle over all kinds of silly things, but for the most part, they like it, yeah.
Did I email you that I fell off to sleep reading the book the other night?
That's not a good sign.
I woke up scratching.
That's not good.